We are going to talk a little bit about different types of community recreation. Again, you know, these terms that I've got up on the screen right now, they really vary. So different people will use the term adapted in different ways. I kind of gave the example of swimming lessons earlier, where I said in some communities you might sign up for an adapted swimming lesson, and it's a one-on-one experience with a quite well-trained instructor. And in other communities, it's, you know, a group lesson and the person's maybe had less experience or less training. Or the flip situation, one-on-one but no training, or great person group lesson. It can be any of the above. So I'm just introducing these as ways for us, these three categories right now, as ways for us to think about this today. But a really important takeaway message here is, you know, always ask the questions, because adapted in one case is going to mean something totally different than adapted in another case. So for today's purposes, here's how we're going to define it. Adapted programs, we're going to call programs, so again, sorry, I should have mentioned this. We are back to the handout where it says choosing a community-based activity, and there's a table there that essentially includes the information that I'm about to cover right now, so please follow along. Adapted programs include what I'm calling an eligibility criteria. So what I mean by that is they may require your child to have a diagnosis to be eligible to participate or not. You know, some communities have these programs set up and they are, you know, they don't require any evidence or proof of diagnosis, and they're just there for children who might require some more support. So again, you need to ask the questions. But what I'm talking about is programs that are really kind of specialized. So they've done something about how they deliver the program that's different than the way they would typically deliver it in terms of the curriculum and or the structure. So maybe it's a smaller group. Maybe they have done things like taught the instructors ways to further break down skills. So that's an example of a curriculum modification. You might see this in something as, like one group that does this quite well, for example, the Red Cross, probably 5-6 years ago now, don't quote me on this, you're gonna have to fact check, but they came out with a re-released Red Cross adapted swim curriculum. And that is a curriculum that some municipalities use in their adapted lessons. And one difference with that curriculum, at the end of the day, the results they're aiming for are the same. The pathways is essentially the same, because we know that there are certain skills you need to learn before other skills in swimming in order to get to that end path of being able to, you know, do a front crawl. But what they've done is they've taken each skill and broken it down into smaller steps, with the recognition of the fact that a lot of the children who access these adapted swimming lessons really need that slightly slower pace. They need to practice skills in that more broken down manner, where they have more repetitions to practice. And they may be challenged if there's a situation where they have to learn kind of a big skill all at once. So it's a great tool that was made available by the Red Cross. And that's an example of a curriculum modification. The other thing that is usually different in an adapted program is that you have the people who are leading the program or supporting the program, whether that's the coach or the community recreation leader or the volunteers who are there, are typically provided with either some additional training and or people who are selected into that role because they have former experience doing work with children who may require extra support. Again, wild differences in the human beings that will run these programs. And, you know, as Deborah alluded to, some of these folks really have the it factor, and others, you know, may be less of a hit with your child. So it's all about sort of seeing what really works for your child. So the second column I'm going to talk about here are what I'm calling programs that really identify themselves as inclusive. So what I mean by that is you've got a club or a program where it's open to everybody, but they have taken steps to deliberately ensure that children who require extra support will get it. So an example of this would be there are some municipalities that have set up day camps where the day camps are open for everybody, but they will designate a certain number of spots for children who require extra support. And they have programs in place such that They have trained staff to add extra staff into the group to make sure that those children get the support that they require to be successful. So the kids who require support are attending the day camp alongside everybody else, but the way the program is set up is such that they have that extra support that they need. So that's what I'm calling an inclusive program for today's purposes, but of course there's many other, you could use that term very differently. That's just what I'm talking about for today. There's nothing about that type of program that's set up differently in terms of the curriculum or the structure necessarily. It's more about the fact that usually they've added some additional resources to ensure that children who require extra support will have it. Some programs will call themselves inclusive. This actually happens a lot. You will see in the verbiage on their website that they say things like, XX organization is an inclusive organization. We welcome everyone to our programs. In my personal advocacy in this area, I have really encouraged every organization I talk to who puts that on their website to say, what do you mean by that? And what I mean is, if you're going to call yourself an inclusive program, what would be very helpful is to list what steps you have taken that makes you so. So for example, it might be, let's just say it's a soccer club, and they say, we're an inclusive program, we welcome everyone. And they say something like, our coaches have received training from blank, or we allow or offer extra support where required. We have training in this area that makes us inclusive. Because of course, when we say inclusive, that means much more beyond autism, right? So, when you see that advertised as part of a program, I would really encourage you as parents, this is a really powerful role you can play here, is to turn around to that organization and ask, how are you inclusive? What are the steps you've taken that makes you an inclusive program? Because it's nice to say it, but what have you really done that makes it so? Okay. And then the last column here, I'm just calling mainstream, meaning it's just your kind of typical program that's out there in the community, open to all. It's the general, there's kind of one general structure and curriculum, nothing about extra supports provided. And just to emphasize that, we've got 3 columns we've just identified here. And I really just want to repeat that your child may find success in any of those 3 columns. Because what it's really about, as Deborah just said, is finding that leader who makes it successful for your child. So I'm going to share some examples later about a leader who we've worked with in the mainstream setting that I think is just a perfect example of what success can look like there. And then you can think about, I'll try to give you other examples too along the way. In your table on your handout, it would be helpful at this point to jot down some examples of programs that you think fit these criteria in your community. And if you're not sure if they exist in your community, that's okay. But maybe think in your head if there are things that do fit that criteria. So a couple examples that I'm aware of and that I've already spoken about this morning. So certainly the Canucks Autism Network programs fit that adapted category in the sense that there's an eligibility criteria to be involved. You have to have an autism diagnosis. The staff have a lot of required training. There's a lot of layers of supervision for the staff. So that side is kind of, we're pretty careful about that part. The programs have a specific curriculum and structure that's designed to ensure that we can accommodate all children. So, Canucks Autism Network really lands solidly in that category. I would say that the SUPA organization I spoke to earlier that runs their surfing camp also falls in this category. And then certainly there are municipal programs that also fall into this category. So sometimes you will find municipal programs that, I don't want to give you a specific example here, but the city offers an adapted swimming lesson. It's for children, so it has an eligibility criteria. So it's for children who XYZ, it will depend on the city, but generally have some sort of a diagnosis. It has a specific curriculum and structure. So there's a reduced group size. They're following Red Cross Adapted, for example. And the staff and volunteers who lead that program have some extra level of training or supervision to ensure they're successful with that group. So there's adaptive. Examples of inclusive programs. So again, this is the program that's open to everyone, but they've done something to make it inclusive, and generally that's added more support. So really municipality day camps are the strongest example that I see of this locally, where you have the day camp set up, they've added extra staff, they do an intake process to ensure that they understand the needs of the child, and then the child is placed alongside the rest of the group. No specific structure, but that extra support is provided. And then finally, in terms of mainstream, there's pretty much everything else you can think of in your community. So whether that's your local recreation programs, such as just your typical skating lessons, for example, local sports like soccer, baseball, lacrosse, hockey, and then all your other community recreation activities as well. So yeah, one thing I haven't spoken about much today, but that's worth mentioning here is, you can have your mainstream, for example, dance class or yoga classes or art lessons. And there are lots and lots of adapted programs as well in those areas these days. So many, for example, I've seen many examples of adapted yoga available in the community, many examples of different types of arts programs that are specially designed for children who might require a slightly different approach. So those are definitely out there as well. But always ask the question. So if it says this is an adapted program or we're inclusive, your first question to that organization should be, oh, how is it that you're inclusive? Like, what is it that you do that makes your program inclusive for all children? Because you for sure will hear different answers depending on who you're talking to.